See if we can get this thing out of the station today. It'd be nice. It'd be so nice. It's yeah. So we're just gonna let Couchbot catch up here for a second. Got my Yang Gang hat on. Math. Heck yeah. All right, Chris Courtney here, new Pragmatic. It's about that time. We do it every weekday, Monday through Friday. It is the Feedback Loop, and another edition of the Feedback Loop. Got some good questions this morning. Abraham popping up, making an appearance. We got Abraham. We got Rebecca. I wanted to circle back on a conversation I had yesterday regarding Tedgel and her bars. I promised her a look into some CSS where instead of using instead of like importing SVGs, just when you're doing little short bar graphs and things, you can just do that with CSS. Provided that like it's percentage based. You can do it with CSS, but there was one other angle I wanted to also address after circling back and looking at that. I'm like, I don't want to just send this over because, and I don't want to avoid the conversation because there's a little pet peeve in there that I wanted to also address. But the first thing I wanted to do, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and share my screen. First thing I wanted to do here is take a look at Rebecca's Knife Doctor stakeholder interview. And full disclosure, so Rebecca's working on this site for a guy who calls himself the Knife Doctor. And really, who doesn't? But he's got a WordPress site. And let's not look at the design of the site. Because as Rebecca has pointed, she pointed out when she talked to the Knife Doctor, he immediately said, "What do you mean my site needs to be redesigned? It looks clean." And you're going to get that from a lot of clients, to be completely honest with you. They have no thought in their head that their design could be any better than it is, nor do they really see whether the site is actually doing what they're intending for it to do. A lot of people see this as kind of like a storefront. I need something online so people know that I'm here. And with the Knife Doctor is wanting to start selling knives, like his knives. And when you look at the site, obviously the first thing that probably pops to mind when you're looking at this is like, wow, there's an exorbitant amount of space given to just saying, welcome to the Knife Doctor. And it's Knife Doctor, welcome to the Knife Doctor. The Knife Doctor needs sharpening by knives. Like, you've got to mow through a lot of stuff to get down to the by knives. So right away, from a perspective of this guy is wanting to sell knives, and I'm certain that like there must be some, it's kind of like this. If you buy your knives from me, and I'm guessing the margin here for him is much higher just on the sharpening. Okay. But this guy, he sharpens knives. Sounds dangerous, but he sharpens knives. And the more knives he sells to people, well, frankly, the more knives he has to sharpen, because if I bought my knife from you, I will probably pay you to come sharpen it when I need it sharpened. Now, I'm not a professional knife sharpener, but most of us, this is a really good point. Most of us aren't. Most of us aren't experts at whatever it is that we're designing. So I'm happy to see Rebecca diving in and learning a little more about this unique niche, because it is unique. I mean, raise your hand if you're watching this. Raise your hand if you know a knife sharpener. Okay, you don't. Most of us don't. So if you were going to work on a site or a product for a knife sharpener, the first thing you should do is sit down with them and figure out what it is they do. She immediately went in, and rather than talking directly to the knife sharpener, she went and looked at that person and that business as it's perceived to people outside of the knife doctor. And that's a very good way of getting a handle on, what is the state of the business right now? How is the business perceived? And it looks like he's extremely knowledgeable and professional, best in category, unsurpassed knowledge, skills, experience. One of the best. All of his all of his customers are to date are foodies, which kind of tells you that he must really focus on like chefs and things like that. They have a specific language that they talk to each other in. Great storyteller, fun to talk to, perfectionist, expert in the craft, can salvage fixed knives that have been missharpened in the past, gives good service. He has 43 5-star reviews on his Facebook page, 0 bad reviews written about him. So here's the upside. You have a client that doesn't need a renovation of their outward profile. There are some clients out there that you can do a lot of work for them, but ultimately it's going to fall down under the weight of previous bad reviews, and you basically have to kind of renovate them and almost like find a way to start over so that you can put them on better ground. Here you have a situation where the client is well regarded, so that's a good thing to go in, and that's something that I think that's always good to have that in your hip pocket before you talk to the client for a stakeholder interview, because you can bring that information to them, and they're going to feel better about knowing where they stand with you. Like if I started a conversation with a stakeholder, and my first question was, how are you regarded in your community? That's a logical question to ask, but it's also a question I could have already answered. So when you go, I see that you're highly regarded. If you flip that, you go, I see that you're highly regarded in the community. I found no negative reviews. You have 43 people who have given you 5-star reviews. You're clearly in a good place in the community. Let's talk about ways that we can capitalize on this. That's going to be a much more receptive conversation, because you're going to be able to make suggestions that they are going to feel better about, because you've already investigated them. So I really think that you've started this off in the right way. There's a couple of things that I thought were interesting. The great storyteller and fun to talk to. This is a spot where I saw what looked like a photo, but I couldn't tell whether it was a video or not. But if this person's like really engaging and fun to talk to, this might be an opportunity to look at including video in the overhaul of the site. It doesn't have to be like I'm going to put a lot of videos on the site. It could just be one, and then linking to a YouTube or whatever where he posts weekly updates. But it seems like if you have somebody who has a personality, that doesn't come across immediately in written or just a photo. I think video is a great equalizer, a great tool. So I would really encourage you to look at that. Additionally, it says he's been getting customer requests for knives, getting enough customer requests. He's looking at, he has some competition that sells knives. He started selling knives for them while on call on a here and there basis. So he's done it. He's got some experience here, but it's been hit and miss. So he's trying to basically operationalize it. One of the things that's interesting also is he's got this certification, and certifications, when there's something unique about the certification, and in this case, he went over to France and did training, and he's the only person in Israel that's certified for this particular thing. I think that's something you want to like display at the top, like get started, such and such certified. And the reason I say this is it's anytime you have a certification and you're the only person in a region that has it, that creates this air of expertise. It carries with it a lot of value. So that is something that I would definitely want you to capitalize on here, even if it at first glance it seems like it's kind of a minor thing. Because I've never heard of this organization. I don't see it listed here. But what I'm going to say is that any certification is better than no certification. And if you have it and you can put that seal of approval or whatever it is, you can mention it. I think that's going to immediately inject value just on the average person coming by. Oh, this guy's certified by this organization, must be good. So I really want to encourage you to find a way to leverage that. As far as growing business by reaching out to more and bigger hotel chains and supermarkets, that's not something that's necessarily going to that's going to be not you. You're focused on what those chains and whatnot find when they reach out to him, but you're not. I don't see this as like you're not a branding professional that's going to like set up a approach for how he should approach his business, unless you have that in your contract. I wouldn't necessarily dive into those things. Wants to strengthen professional brand against competitors. This is where you've got to really identify the competitors and see what's out there. Like, what are the competitors doing? And that will tell you what the table stakes are. So this is like the classic competitive analysis. Wants to start selling knives and services on the website. I would investigate, like, how are people buying these knives right now? Are they going to the store? Are they buying them off Amazon? I know you mentioned Amazon a little lower, but this is where talking to some customers and getting an idea of, like, how do they make that purchase? I don't have the foggiest idea. Is it going to be just enough to, like, just put a link on the site, or is there some other thing he needs to be doing? That is something that you want to identify. Automate invoicing and payments as much as possible, save time and money. If it's a WordPress site, there's many plugins available for e-commerce, so I would investigate that. Wants customers to be able to schedule events and see his calendar, and neighborhoods where he'll be directly from his website. We've gotten into this before with the CrossFit thing. I do think that this is interesting, though, because if he has like a schedule of events, this might be where one of those calendars that was more like for baseball teams or concerts, where it's like on the 18th and on the 22nd, on the 31st, you can list them out in a list, and you can do something more expressive with it that way, rather than like a Monday through Friday calendar. So we saw some plugins that weren't appropriate for CrossFit, but they might be appropriate here, and we've already identified them. I think the Elf, I forget the name. We can go back in the feedback loop and find those, but there was a widget that might give you a leg up there to do something very quickly for him. So yeah, I think you're starting off in the right spot. I think there's some clear questions on how people are buying the knives now. I think there's some clear opportunities related to his expertise and the fact that he's a great storyteller. So that's kind of like where I would go next. I would basically have that conversation with the knife doctor, making sure that they realize that you've already done some homework here. And then I would definitely want to talk to a few users to better understand how are they making their purchasing decisions, because that's going to tell you what the site needs to show. Is it just show the blades, or would it be beneficial if he had a video of him demonstrating why this blade is so great? And that's something that, going back to video, I really do believe that anytime the personality can talk specifically to the product that the other person is going to be using, it's helpful. I don't know anything about that. I don't do that every day. It's exactly what I do. I professionally like to explain what it is that I think you should be doing, rather than just kind of pointing you over, oh, go watch this video, or oh, go do that tutorial. I like to walk through it for you. So that's my take on this. I know you said you've got user flows, but you're still working on them. You've got a lot of things in flux right now, but I think that there's some clear opportunities here, and I would encourage you to push forward. There was another question though that you asked, and Abraham was asking, that was related to portfolios and case studies, and I want to shoot over to Figma for a second because I want to kind of draw this out. I'm just going to create a new file here because I've been working on a lot of stuff. So we were discussing case studies, and this came up because Abraham got some feedback from someone that said, hey, your case study is, quote, cookie cutter. And what they meant was you have a style that I've seen before, which, by the way, isn't negative. It's kind of like an intersection. I don't necessarily enjoy intersections I don't understand. If you've ever went to a stoplight, you know how to operate in a stoplight. The first time you encounter a roundabout, which is a very efficient way to go through an intersection, but the first time you encounter that roundabout, you're not quite sure where the exits are for it. You're not quite sure how to get into it. You have to slow down and ease and work your way around. So, the traffic light may seem very cookie cutter. This is just like everyone I've seen before. I also know what to do when I get there. So I'm not so caught up on this is good or bad. But what they were reacting to, I believe, is the fact that you had, your intro, you had this objective, you had all these little sections as you work down through the project that kind of explain each particular phase of the thing. And I'm just kind of mocking out like what I suspect they saw when they looked at it, and they were like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. You go a little wide, you show some wireframes, and you show your A/B testing, and then you do this, and then you do that. And it's really long, and I don't really want to read the really long thing. I just want to know if you're a good designer or not. So, I mentioned this because Rebecca's gone through, and she's got a really long case study, and Tedrell's gone through, and she's got a really long case study, and Luigi's writing his case study right now, as is Kara, as is Eve. Like, everybody's going through doing their thing. And I mentioned that, while this is the case study, and I talked last week about this. Well, this is your case study. Your case study is the foundation, okay? It is the foundation that the house is built on top of. I would never want you going into an interview and simply opening up your laptop and present and saying, okay, I'm gonna walk you through this step by step by step by step. I would hope that you had a presentation. And I'm just gonna come over here, and we're gonna get this. I would hope that you had a presentation that was slide after slide after slide. And, you know, basically, if I put this in prototype mode just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, like maybe this is a 1-to-1, and maybe you pull this section out, and maybe you jump down here, but I'm looking at your slides that you're putting together for the interview, and you're not going through each phase of the case study. You're pulling out selections, you're expanding, you're showing different things. Maybe there are things that are here that are buried in the actual artifacts on the case study. But the case study is the base for the presentation that follows. Also, I look at this as an opportunity to maybe do something a little different with regard to the site itself. So, and for this one, I'm going to put this over here. And this is going to be highlights. I'm going to call this highlights. So, highlights is different from your home page. So here's your home page. Homepage has a job to do. It has to introduce you. It has to also basically act as a directory to all your things. So here you have the homepage, and this is your, hey, I'm Abraham and I'm awesome. And then you have your, you probably have some sort of, and I'm gonna just kind of redesign this really fast. Probably have some sort of here are my case studies, and they look like that. And then maybe you have some sort of contact down here below, and that's pretty much your homepage. Okay, maybe yours is a little different. What I look at for highlights, though, is highlights doesn't have to do the job of introducing you. Highlights has to do the job of summarizing the work. So, highlights could also be, you could also say, okay, highlights and the work. So I'm going to have a page that walks through all the important things, or basically, I'm going to take one really cool thing from each project, and I'm going to highlight it here on the work page. Like, what did I learn from doing this project on food trucks? What did I learn from doing this volunteer project on pick up basketball leagues for children? And these things do not have to be like the same size, or you can, like, maybe this one's got a little more to it than this one up here. Maybe there's one down here that's just text. But the idea here is that you've got these case studies, all right? And there's case study, and there's case study, and they're long, okay? And with each of these case studies, you've got a presentation that you're putting together for the interview. I don't want you to get into this, I'm going to give everybody a highlight of the work. Like, I'm going to go in depth and kind of give you a summary and show you some pieces of work on the homepage, because you've got to introduce yourself, and you got to say, okay, here's all the projects that I've done. You could say view highlights in a button, and take somebody to a page like this. And then if they wanted to go through and go to a particular case study, they could. So, another way to look at this is if you wanted to say, instead of the homepage being your work, you could just say, view highlights. Maybe you have some sort of presentational element that makes this a little more interesting to look at, and you say, view portfolio highlights, that takes them to this work highlights page, and then from here, get back over into prototype mode so we can kind of see this in action. But from here, I click here and it takes me to this one. I click here and it takes me to that one. I click here and it takes me to the one over here. And now you have this middle ground where if you want to click through and see the big long case study, it's still there. But I'm gonna distill and produce this highlight reel for you of stuff that I'm really proud of. Like maybe in one project I'm really proud of the wireframes. Maybe in another project I'm really proud of the research, or I'm really proud of the prototype. Like highlights, okay? What is the best thing about each of these projects? Maybe you're just proud of the subject matter that you covered. But whatever it is that you're really that's really captured your attention, you put that here rather than what I feel like a lot of people are saying you should do. Oh, your case study's got to be much, much shorter, much smaller. I don't want to read all this. Well, I don't want you to read all of it either. I want you to call me in for an interview because I've got all this stuff, and we're gonna discuss it in a different form. You could also include the deck. There's nothing saying that you couldn't say, yeah, and I'm going to link directly to my interview deck for this particular project. I'm going to link directly to it out of the highlights. There's all sorts of ways that you can remix what you have. What I don't want to do is I don't want to tear down. It's kind of like, and I'll say it by making a reference to one of my favorite groups in the entire world, Rush. Rush has this 7-song opus that starts their album 2112. It was released in, I believe, 1977. It's a 20-minute song. Comes in 7 parts. Well, even in the excess of the 70s, they wouldn't play that on the radio. Okay? So they released a cut-down version of it that was formatted for the radio. It's like 4 minutes. It's called Temples of Ceres. And they released that. But they didn't get rid of the 7-part opus. The 7-part opus is still there. The 7-part opus was mentioned it was referenced directly when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Had they caved to pressure to produce the radio signal, which they did produce, they might not be in a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they would have thrown away the big, long, epic masterpiece. I'm saying that your big, long, epic masterpiece is the foundation, and you can make a lot of things out of it. But don't throw it away just because one jackass tells you that, it's too long, this is cookie cut. Like, whatever, jagoff. It's not for you, I guess. Here's these highlights. Yeah, I got a shorter form thing over here on the highlights. And you can talk. The thing that's beautiful about the highlights is you can make it whatever you want to make it. It's a best of. It's a best of you. Now, you got to have good stuff. Okay? A long case study can hide a lot of flaws. It can also expose a lot of flaws. So, highlights, I think, is a direction that I'm pushing people to go in, but I'm also pushing people to go in the build a deck so that when you go to an interview, you have a deck to show that's formatted for large screens, and you could link to that too. Long story short, your case study is the basis that everything gets built out of. There's a link to the longer case study in everything. You want to go in depth? We can go in depth. All right? But I also know how to not have a long-winded conversation with you, so I'm going to show you these shrunken down parts that are more tailored for your little minds. I just took great offense to that. Somebody saying that to you. As if, I'd like to see their portfolio. 9 times out of 10 when somebody gives me that, gives a comment like that, They don't have a portfolio. Oh, I haven't updated my portfolio in years. Yeah, okay, well, shut up then. So, anyway, I'll get off my high horse now. But highlights, I think, is a way to address that. And I also, again, I don't believe you don't write the longer case study, because I think that is the central hub for everything that gets built. At some point, you'll forget about all the details. And if you don't have that case study, things will wash away. And there are stories that I remember just by accident about projects that never made it into a case study, and I forgot about them. I forgot about them because I made the little 2 screenshots and a blurb about each project that I worked on for like 6 months. And it's like, I just don't think that's good business for you moving forward. Okay, so that's highlights, and that's my take on the rude people that don't update their portfolios, but they think that they have an idea of how you should. So I wanted to take us over to the CSS bars thing that I was talking about with Tedral yesterday. So Tedral had this responsive portfolio sidebar thing, and there were these little SVG charts, and they were little SVG lines that were just drawn and then dropped in. The problem was they were perfect for a side rail, but the moment on mobile, when you got down, they still were like really short. And because there's no scale, there was no scale associated with it, it looked like something was like 75% on desktop, but then they were like 25% on mobile because the length of the bar, the width changed. So my suggestion was to come and do something in CSS that gives you a proportional size that is consistent from one presentation mode to the next. And all that I'm doing here is I've created an element. I've got a class of chart, and I want to show you what chart is doing. So chart basically is just handling the width of this. If I said 100%, it would just go the full width of this box, okay? And it's going to consistently styled with that box. Obviously, I don't think you want 100%. You might want 80 or something like that. But the percentage of this fill is always the same if you're constructing this as I'm doing here. So I have chart controlling the width of the actual frame that the bar is going into. Then I have the word example here is just a label for that chart. Then the div child is here, and basically all child is doing is providing the background color for the bar itself. So if I change this to 000, this becomes a black bar. Okay, and it's kind of hard to read, but you get the idea. Child is necessary because I need something for that bar to react to. If I lose child, the bar, I have no idea how long the bar should really be. I have no idea what 100% is. So if I have child active and I have a background color, then I'm good to go. I have a class of fill, and that's what's providing the actual length of the chart. And as you can see here, it has a height. So this height is dictating to child how tall it should be. If I flip that around, I would have to, if I took that height away and then I put it on child, I would get a bar, but I wouldn't get a fill. Okay? So that's why instead of having it on child, I have it on fill, because by having it on fill, it forces a height onto child. And then I have a width of 75%. If I change it to 95%, it does that. If I change it to 5%, it does that. It is proportional. It is fantastic. It is amazing. So when I was writing this for the Tribune for the election graphics that we were doing, I was just targeting the width of that fill class and updating it with the percentage of votes tallied for a particular political candidate, and it was changing the width of the fill. So if a political candidate had 29% of the vote, when that updated, and it would just inject 29 in there, and suddenly the bar chart looked like that. If somebody shot up to 72%, it would do that. And that's all it was doing. It was just taking the percentage of the candidate, shoving it into the width of a particular class, and then printing it to the screen. This is responsive, so that it, by doing it by percentage, it updates, which works really well for your purpose, Tejal, because you had this design that was moving, like from a rail to the center, or from a rail to just like one column, but that SVG wasn't going to update with you. CSS will. That's why I'm like encouraging you to go this route. The caveat. I also noticed that you were saying you had some language with it that was like behavior is this much, and then difficulty was that much. And what dawned on me when I was looking at it, that was these were more decoration than statistical. And I worry about things that are decoration. I worry that they are not. They inject a lot of question into your project. I want things where you're using statistics. If you have a bar chart, I want to be able to point to, okay, what's this? Where did that number come from? And if you don't have a number, I don't want to use a bar chart. I don't want to use charts at all. If it's just like, oh, well, this person was, and I always talk about this when it comes to things like, you're going to include how good you are at Figma in your resume, and you say, oh, I'm a 7 out of 10, or I'm a 9 out of 10, or I'm a 2 out of 10. Like, how are you equating that number? Like, I just don't know how you get that number, because for Photoshop, been using it for 20 something years, 25 years. I probably know 5% of it. Okay? Because I do the same repetition over and over and over again. I know how to use the pen tool really great. I'm crap at cloning. I've never really used the 3D transform tool. So does that mean I'm terrible or an expert at Photoshop? Don't know. I couldn't assign a value to it. It's an impossible task. And I realize part of this is my journalism background. Like, I can't put fake numbers into things. But I really want you to focus on using charts where you have actual data, and not using charts just for decoration. So, coming back to this, if you don't have a number to put a width on something, if like you don't have a number that you're actually pulling from, I wouldn't use a chart there. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me in this edition of the Feedback Loop. Kept my hat on the entire time. Math. Yeah, my head's like nice and toasty now. It's great. Anyway, I hope you're all having a great time going through the program. And I will. I've got a couple meetings coming up, so I'm going to bounce off of here, go get to that. But I hope that I will see all of you again tomorrow. All right, take care.